Hello, everybody. This workshop is about community organizing. What we thought we'd do is start with a go-around so that everybody can introduce themselves. Maybe say your name and say if you have any experience in community organizing or if you work, like briefly, if you do community organizing right now, if that's okay. And we're purposely not defining community organizing at this point because we're actually hoping to have a discussion starting with Danielle talking about Saul Alinsky style community organizing and current forms of that, and then branching more into what we as anarchists feel around community organizing. So, yeah. So, I guess you start, yes.
My name's Danielle. I'm from Philadelphia, and I currently work as an employed community organizer just outside of Philadelphia. For an organization that uses Saul Alinsky style.
I'm Mac. I'm not an organizer as such, but I'm part of a poor people's organization called the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, which does do community organizing. And I've had some background through them and also through a migrant justice group called No One Is Illegal doing community organizing.
Yes.
So just as an opener, so we're going to talk about the more traditional theories around community organizing, and I'm going to add a little itty bit around some of the anarchist theory development that I've seen around. But the idea today is not, like, we don't have the answers. The idea is to provoke a discussion about what is community organizing from an anarchist perspective, and why is it or is it not beneficial for anarchists to do community organizing.
No. Yeah, so we don't use like a lot of experience in the room, and we have a half hour, so I'm going to really try to talk pretty quickly, just to kind of like basically kind of raise some ideas to just kind of start the discussion. And just a little bit about myself, I really come politically from an anarchist background and started doing work during global justice movement work in the late 90s and the early 2000s, and then September 11th happened, and things kind of shifted, and my work kind of focused more on really kind of local community work. And kind of after that, I was looking to kind of get out of my kind of like isolated far left community, and was really kind of seeking out work that I would hope would have a broader impact and be maybe a little bit more effective. Basically, I felt like we were kind of losing, and I wanted to win. And so I took a job as a paid organizer with an organization that describes itself as a multiracial, bipartisan coalition of institutions. And by institutions, they mean churches, schools, and municipalities and civic organizations, so people that are already organized in groups in some capacity. And we do our work based on, I would call it a neo-Alinsky model. I'm just going to assume that everyone in the room knows who Saul Alinsky is, maybe. Really quick, he was an organizer in the 30s, 40s, and he wrote a couple books about it and developed kind of this like model of doing community organizing work. He was all the rage back when Obama was running for president because Barack Obama worked for a number of years for an organization that conducted community organizing in a very kind of strict Saul Alinsky fashion. So I was really drawn to this work mainly because it was really not non-ideological. It was a very kind of pragmatic, straightforward approach, and I was like a little bit tired of kind of like the sectarianism and the isolation that I was experiencing working in the far left, and they were really kind of focused on wins. So kind of just really our model of how we do our work, it's pretty simple. We pick an issue that is base building and unifying, and that's winnable, and we only work on these issues. So we're just going to work on an issue that we can win on. So for an example, if we're working in a community and we have some folks that are in the community and they're talking maybe about like issues around prison criminal justice reform, sentencing issues, we would kind of tend to go like, that's a hard issue. We're probably going to have a hard time winning on that one. We'll get back to that one after we maybe kind of like win some of these easier things and build our power. So basically, that's how we kind of like develop the issues. So we'll work on issues mainly around school funding, affordable housing, stuff like that. And so, so we have our issue, and then in order to do that, we do what we call demonstrate our power, and that's really basically is we're talking about turnout and really showing your power by showing how many people that you have. And you're able to do that because you're working with institutions. So you have a relationship with a pastor, they're connected to 600 people, you can turn 600 people out to an event or an action, and then that's kind of how you like demonstrate your power in order to get your win. So in the relationship, when we have this issue, we kind of have this power, we also identify a target. So you want to get more funding for your schools, your target is probably going to be a legislator or someone in like the kind of traditional structures of power. And then, no problem. And that's somebody who can give you something, right? You want your win. You have your attainable goal. And this is the person who can give you that. And so, you turn out your people, you show your power, you confront your target, hopefully you have your win. And you do that over and over and over again. With the long-term vision of that, you're going to basically build this power organization that has kind of a track record of these wins. So that is like really bare bones, basically kind of how we do our campaigns. And just a couple of things that come up with this. Some things that I think that are valuable about this approach is that winning feels really good. We win a lot, and basically with these small wins, there's just kind of a lot of energy around that. There's a lot of like oxygen in the organization because we kind of have this track record of winning on these issues. I have a lot of criticisms of this model. This is kind of my paid work, not really kind of where my heart is. So things that kind of come up for me, and I hope we can talk a little bit more about this, is that with a non-ideological approach that only focuses on winnable issues, obviously that's really ill-equipped to really win actual true power for oppressed peoples, right? Like there's just obviously a lot of kind of limits within that approach. And also, really what you're doing is you're kind of trying just to get a better deal for your crew. So you've got your crew of people that you've been able to pull together, like the folks in your school, and you're getting a better deal for them. But it's like, what about the bigger picture? Kind of what about everybody else? And really, at the end of the day, this kind of isn't inspiring enough, I think, for really kind of like a big kind of broad movement type of work. If you're just kind of winning small wins for your crew, there's just kind of a limit to how inspiring that can be for the long term. So that's my 5 seconds. I'm going to turn it over to that.
So, and this is only from my own experience in history, so it's got holes all over the place. But my experience around anarchist community organizing began in 1996. There was an anarchist conference in Chicago called Active Resistance. And we formed a community organizing core, like a study group basically at that conference, which I was only marginally involved in, specifically to develop an anarchist critique of Alinsky, largely around the fact that Alinsky's model, the critiques that you brought up, that's non-ideological, that can lead to weird things like you can be, because it's community-led without an ideology, you can end up lobbying for more police in a neighborhood, because that's what people want, and it's a winnable goal. We held a follow-up conference in Toronto in 1998, also called Active Resistance, because why get a new name? And we were active and we were resisting. And we had a community organizing core there as well, and we further critiqued the Alinsky model. Out of the 98 conference in Toronto, a bunch of us who were anarchists and really interested in seeing community organizing done in the anarchist, from an anarchist model, actually got involved in OCAP. And partially out of that, OCAP historically has been, at that point in time, was a poor people's organization rooted in welfare recipients, with also a large constituency, which we still have in the homeless community. So out of that, OCAP became, the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty, became a specifically anti-capitalist organization because it wasn't all anarchists, and started doing, was already quite ideological, but started doing more ideologically based community organizing, closer to the anarchist model. And we came up against the opposite contradictions. So we would go into a community, like we went into housing, like public housing communities, and we said, look, your security guards are beating the crap out of your youth. We need to get rid of your security guards. And then they said, okay, you get rid of our security guards. What is your plan in terms of providing security for this community? And we were like, we don't know. So, we've also come up against contradictions from the opposite side. Also being an explicitly anti-capitalist organization has limited what communities we can work in sometimes, and limits also who does and does not join our organization. That conversation, I think, and others in the room will correct me if I'm wrong, also came into the organizing for the G20 summit in Toronto, in that OCAP, along with other community groups, got involved in the organizing very early with a very critical stance around, the whole summit hopping debate that we've all heard a billion times, in that we didn't want a convergence in Toronto that would blow up into a big mess, and then it would end, and all the community organizations would be left to pick up the slack. We want to try and have a mobilization that would strengthen community organizations. And that was part of the ideological reason that we called the main organizing body for the G20, the Toronto Community Mobilization Network. Anyway, so that's sort of my trajectory of where I've gone with at least anarchist and community organizing models. One of the things we identified at Active Resistance is that in our experience, which of course is what it is, anarchist community organizing tends to fall down into two different models. And they're somewhat contradictory, but they can also be very complementary. There's anarchist community organizing, which I'm sure a lot of people in this community do, where you build institutions that are alternatives to state power. So I think one could argue that Food Not Bombs tries to be that. What else? Books Through Bars, to some degree, tries to be that. When they were doing, squatting can try to be that. And then there's anarchist community organizing, like I do, where you actually get involved in organizations that are trying to use collective power to force demands from the state. Very much, in some ways, based on the Alinsky model, where you use your collective strength to get something from the state, hopefully building at the same time the idea of people power within those communities. And sometimes the two work together well, and sometimes the two don't work together. Sometimes we like to fight each other because it's easier to fight other anarchists than the state. And I guess the only thing I would say in terms of community organizing that I guess sort of defines it for me is it tends to be where you're working with a specific constituency that has specific needs or suffers oppression in a specific way to try and, whether it's through building alternative institutions or through making a collective demand of power, is trying to actually achieve something concrete that can help that community. And I guess at this point, we're going to open up. And I guess the two questions we really wanted to look at is, what do people see anarchist community organizing look like? And then, is it important for us as anarchists to do that work? And if it is, why? Which is really three questions. So yeah.
I just want to throw this out. Something you said just for this. I'm Ryan. I'm from Baltimore. I founded and work with an organization called the Civilian Soldier Alliance that tries to organize the members of the United States military and veterans to withdraw their support from the wars. It was all founded by anarchists, but it was founded in conjunction with groups like the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, the United Workers here in Baltimore, organizations that are long rooted in community organizing practice and theory. We wanted to take from them, and they actually came and trained our members and members of the veterans organization we work with in their theory, but it was also combined with our experiences as anarchists and anti-authoritarians. And I just want to mention both, like one of the benefits and one of the problems that I've had with it. One is I think a number of us in the organization, as we spent a year developing a strategy around one goal, right? And some anarchist critiques of community organizing is that they're single issue, and I think there's a huge difference between single issue and single goal, right? Goals are important. Anarchists have a problem with goals often, in my experience. So we wanted to inject goals into our radical activism. But within that, you hit this point where you're you've done all this work, and then you're so in 10 years, if everything goes right, we're going to win this tiny-ass little reform within the United States military. That literally is what we're doing. Ideally, the organized, and this is the good part of it, right? It's ideally that process radicalizes things beyond what we could anticipate, and it actually breaks those boundaries of what externally looks like, oh, you're going to win this dinky little goal, But in reality, it's like, no, we're finding a clever way to like open up this huge radical space within the U.S. military, which is really hard to do, and it could get the ball rolling. So I think that's, in my experience and opinion, that's where anarchists can be extremely important within these things. Is like it's not a way of winning a goal; it's a way of opening that radical space that we try to open in a lot of different ways.
Can I also just, on the goal thing too, I also think it's important, at least in my limited experience, particularly working with the homeless and with welfare recipients, a lot of people under severe strain are not able to join a far-reaching political battle because life is just kind of the shits. And so if you can't actually help people get material gains on a short-term basis, it's really hard to keep them involved because it's such a stressful life.
You need a Band-Aid. Otherwise you keep bleeding and you can't fight.
Yeah.